If anyone asks where I am, tell them I am part of the surprise. Those were the last words Ava Sterling heard before the lock clicked behind her. Not a dramatic slam, not a terrifying noise, just a quiet metallic click that somehow felt worse. Upstairs, guests were laughing beneath crystal chandeliers. A live band played soft jazz. Champagne glasses touched. The birthday celebration of millionaire Nathan Sterling was already being called the event of the year along the California coast. Yet beneath the mansion, hidden below the marble floors and ocean views, Nathan's pregnant wife stood alone in a basement that suddenly felt much smaller than it had 5 minutes earlier. Ava stared at the closed door. At first she smiled. Nathan loved surprises. That was what she told herself. He had kissed her forehead, guided her downstairs, and promised he would return shortly. But as the seconds passed, something felt wrong. Very wrong. She reached for the handle. Locked. Her smile faded. Why would a husband lock his pregnant wife inside a basement during his own birthday party? The question settled into her mind like a stone. Then another question followed. What was Nathan trying so hard to keep hidden upstairs? Or worse, what was he trying to keep hidden down here? Ava pulled out her phone. No signal. The screen reflected her worried expression before going dark again. She slowly placed one hand over her stomach. The baby shifted gently. That small movement usually calmed her. Tonight it only made her more aware of how isolated she was. Above her, applause erupted. The birthday speech must have started. Nathan was probably standing in front of 200 guests right now, smiling for cameras and shaking hands with investors. To the outside world, he was the perfect husband, the perfect businessman, the perfect future father. That image had taken years to build. Ava knew because she had helped build it beside him. 3 years earlier they looked like a magazine cover. Luxury vacations, charity galas, oceanfront properties, headlines celebrating their success. Everyone envied them. Everyone wanted their life. Yet over the past few months, small cracks had started appearing. Late-night phone calls Nathan never explained. Meetings that lasted until dawn. Financial conversations that ended the moment she entered the room. Whenever she asked questions, he smiled and changed the subject. At the time she convinced herself it was stress. Successful people carried heavy responsibilities. At least that was what she wanted to believe. A faint ticking sound interrupted her thoughts. Tick, tick, tick. Ava turned toward the far corner of the basement. An old wall clock hung crookedly above several storage shelves. She frowned immediately. The clock should not have been working. She remembered seeing it years ago during renovations. The batteries had been removed long ago. Yet the second hand moved steadily forward. Tick, tick, tick. The sound echoed through the room with unnatural precision. Ava stepped closer. The basement air felt colder with every step. She studied the clock carefully. Dust covered most of the frame, but one section looked cleaner than the rest. Recently touched. Recently moved. Her pulse quickened. Upstairs, guests sang happy birthday to Nathan Sterling. Downstairs, Ava slowly reached toward the clock. Because for the first time that night, she was no longer wondering why she had been locked inside the basement. She was beginning to wonder what existed behind the wall. The ticking seemed louder now. Tick, tick, tick. Ava stood in front of the old wall clock, her hand hovering inches from the frame. The basement around her remained silent except for the distant sounds of celebration filtering through the ceiling. Somewhere above, guests were laughing with Nathan. Cameras were flashing. Glasses were being raised in his honor. Down here, every second felt strangely important. Ava finally placed her hand against the side of the clock. The wood felt colder than expected. She pushed gently. Nothing happened. She tried again. This time she felt the slightest movement. Her pulse quickened. The clock was not attached firmly to the wall. It shifted almost half an inch before stopping. Ava glanced back toward the locked basement door. Part of her still hoped Nathan would return and explain everything. Part of her wanted to believe there was a reasonable explanation for all of this. But another part, the part that had been quietly collecting questions for months, was no longer willing to ignore what was happening. She pushed harder. A faint clicking sound echoed behind the wall. Ava froze. For several seconds, she did not move. Then she slowly pushed once more. A narrow gap appeared between two sections of concrete. Cool air drifted through the opening. Ava stared in disbelief. Hidden behind the clock was something she never expected to find beneath her own home. A concealed passageway. Upstairs, Nathan Sterling smiled as investors congratulated him on another successful year. To everyone around him, he looked confident and composed. Yet several times during the conversation his attention drifted toward the grandfather clock near the ballroom entrance, then toward his watch, then toward the west side of the mansion. The pattern repeated again and again. Martha Reed noticed. Martha had worked inside the Sterling household for nearly 9 years. She knew the rhythms of the family better than most people. Tonight, Nathan seemed distracted. Not nervous, not frightened, distracted, as though part of his attention was focused somewhere else entirely. Back in the basement, Ava widened the hidden opening and carefully stepped inside. The passage beyond looked surprisingly modern. Small recessed lights lined the ceiling. Fresh electrical wiring ran along the walls. The air smelled clean, not dusty. Someone maintained this place regularly. The realization sent another wave of unease through her. This was not an abandoned secret from decades ago. It was being used now. She moved slowly through the corridor, one hand brushing against the wall for balance. The baby shifted gently beneath her hand. Ava took a deep breath and continued forward. After about 30 feet, the corridor turned sharply to the left. At the far end stood a steel door unlike anything else in the mansion. A digital keypad glowed beside it. Green numbers illuminated the darkness. The sight felt completely out of place beneath a luxury family home. Ava approached cautiously. Then she heard something. At first she thought it was machinery, a faint vibration hidden behind the door. But then the sound came again. A voice. Human. Quiet. Almost impossible to hear. Ava stepped closer. Her heart began racing. The voice seemed to be speaking to itself, or perhaps to someone else. She could not tell. She placed her ear against the cold steel surface. Silence followed. Then came a single sentence spoken from the other side. If you found this door, it means he finally ran out of time. Ava pulled back immediately. Her breath caught in her throat. Whoever was behind that door knew exactly who she was looking for. Ava stared at the steel door while her heart pounded against her ribs. The voice on the other side had sounded calm. Too calm. Not surprised. Not confused. As though whoever was behind that door had been expecting this moment for a very long time. She swallowed hard and stepped closer. Who are you? She asked. Silence followed. The green light on the keypad continued glowing steadily. Somewhere far above, muffled music drifted through layers of concrete and steel. Then the voice returned. My name is Lucas Grant. Ava frowned immediately. The name sounded familiar. She had heard Nathan mention it years ago during business conversations, financial meetings, investment reviews, long conference calls that seemed to last forever. Lucas Grant, she repeated. Nathan's former financial advisor? A brief laugh came from the other side of the door. It carried no humor, only exhaustion. Former is one way to describe it. Ava glanced at the keypad. What are you doing in there? This time the silence lasted longer. Trying to survive the truth. The answer sent a chill through her. Upstairs, the birthday celebration continued beneath glittering chandeliers. Nathan Sterling stood near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by investors and local business leaders. Every camera seemed drawn toward him. Every conversation revolved around his success. Yet Martha Reed continued noticing something unusual. Nathan kept checking his watch, then his phone, then the grandfather clock near the entrance. The pattern repeated so often that it became impossible to ignore. Martha had spent years working in wealthy homes. She knew when people were worried. Nathan looked worried. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for her. Back beneath the mansion, Ava pressed her hand against the cold steel surface. Lucas, what did you mean when you said he ran out of time? She heard movement on the other side. A chair scraping across a floor. Papers shifting. Then a slow exhale. Tell me something first, Lucas said. Why did Nathan bring you down here tonight? Ava hesitated. He said he had a surprise for me. Another laugh. Shorter this time. Sadder. Of course he did. Ava felt frustration rising inside her. Stop speaking in riddles and tell me what is happening. The response came immediately. Nathan Sterling is not celebrating tonight. Ava blinked. What? Everyone upstairs thinks this is a birthday party. Lucas lowered his voice. Nathan thinks it is a deadline. Ava felt her pulse quicken. The words made no sense. Yet somehow they felt important. Deadline for what? She asked. No answer came. Instead, she heard footsteps approaching from the other side of the door. Then Lucas spoke again. How far along are you? The question caught her off guard. 7 months. Silence. Then another slow exhale. Then it is exactly what I feared. Ava stepped closer. What are you talking about? Lucas answered carefully, choosing each word. The child you are carrying is connected to something worth more money than most people will ever see in their entire lives. Ava froze. The corridor suddenly felt colder. Her grandfather had been wealthy. Everyone knew that. Family trusts existed. Estate plans existed. But Nathan had always managed those conversations. She rarely paid attention. How do you know that? She asked. Because I helped build the financial structure. Lucas paused. And because discovering what Nathan planned to do with it is the reason I ended up behind this door. Upstairs, applause suddenly erupted. Someone had announced the arrival of the birthday cake. Guests gathered around smiling and recording videos with their phones. Nathan smiled for the cameras. Yet at that exact moment, his phone vibrated. He glanced down. The color drained from his face. A security notification flashed across the screen. Unauthorized movement detected. Lower restricted sector. For the first time that night, genuine alarm appeared in his eyes. And beneath the mansion, Ava realized she was standing at the edge of a secret far bigger than a locked basement. The security alert remained on Nathan Sterling's phone for less than 3 seconds, but it was enough. He stared at the screen while the birthday cake rolled into the center of the ballroom. Guests applauded. Phones lifted to record the moment. The band began playing again. Yet Nathan barely seemed to notice. Unauthorized movement detected. Lower restricted sector. The message repeated itself in his mind. Somewhere beneath the mansion, something had gone wrong. He forced a smile as a photographer asked him to stand beside the cake. The camera flashed. Nathan smiled again. Then he excused himself and stepped away from the crowd. Martha Reed noticed immediately. She watched him disappear toward the west corridor instead of remaining with his guests. Her concern deepened. Ava was still missing. Nathan was clearly distracted. And now he seemed eager to leave his own celebration. Down below, Ava remained standing beside the steel door. Her thoughts raced. Lucas Grant knew about her child. He knew about the trust. He knew something serious enough to make Nathan panic. Tell me exactly what Nathan planned, she said. Through the door, she heard papers shifting. Then Lucas answered. Before I tell you that, you need to understand something. Nathan was not always this person. Ava frowned. What does that mean? Years ago he was ambitious, but careful. Then the losses started. Lucas paused. At first they were small. A bad investment. A failed project. A few wrong decisions. Nothing unusual. Ava listened carefully. And then he stopped trying to recover his losses. Lucas lowered his voice. He started trying to hide them. A chill moved through Ava's body. Above them, distant music vibrated through the ceiling. The contrast felt unreal. A glamorous party overhead. A hidden conversation beneath it. How much did he lose? She asked. Silence lingered for several seconds. Enough to make your child's trust look like a lifeboat. Ava closed her eyes. The words landed heavily. She suddenly remembered countless moments from the past year. Nathan canceling vacations. Nathan taking mysterious calls after midnight. Nathan insisting on reviewing family legal documents himself. At the time, none of it seemed connected. Now every memory felt different. Why are you behind that door? She asked quietly. Lucas laughed again. The sound was tired. Because I asked too many questions. Ava stepped closer. Nathan put you there? Not exactly. Another pause followed. But when I discovered the hidden accounts, I became a problem. Upstairs, Nathan moved quickly through a private hallway leading toward the basement access area. His expression had completely changed. Gone was the charming host everyone admired. In his place was a man calculating every second. He checked his phone again. No additional alerts. That should have reassured him. Instead, it made him more nervous. Back in the corridor, Ava noticed something she had missed before. A small security camera hidden near the ceiling. The tiny lens pointed directly toward the steel door. Her stomach tightened. Lucas, she whispered. Someone is watching this corridor. I know, he replied immediately. That is why you need to look behind the keypad. Ava glanced toward the glowing numbers. Confused, she stepped closer. The keypad appeared ordinary at first. Then she noticed a small gap along one edge. Carefully, she pressed against it. A hidden panel clicked open. Inside sat a compact storage drive and a folded piece of paper. Ava unfolded it slowly. Her eyes widened as she read the first line. The paper contained account numbers, transaction records, and one handwritten sentence. If you are reading this, Nathan knows the truth is already escaping. The folded note trembled slightly in Ava's hand as she read the sentence again. If you are reading this, Nathan knows the truth is already escaping. The words felt less like a warning and more like a countdown. She looked at the small storage drive hidden behind the keypad. Whatever Lucas had concealed there, he clearly believed it mattered enough to risk everything. What is on this drive? She asked. Through the steel door, Lucas answered immediately. The proof. Ava slipped the drive into her pocket. Proof of what? The accounts. The transfers. The real reason tonight matters. Upstairs, the birthday celebration continued, but the atmosphere had begun to change. Guests noticed Nathan disappearing for longer periods. Investors exchanged curious looks. The birthday cake remained untouched near the center of the ballroom. The candles had already burned low. Martha Reed moved quietly through the crowd while keeping Nathan in sight. Years of working inside wealthy households had taught her one important lesson. People revealed their secrets when their plans started falling apart. Nathan was unraveling. Not publicly. Not yet. But Martha could see it in the way he checked his phone every few seconds. Back below the mansion, Ava unfolded the note completely. More writing appeared on the back. Several account numbers. Dates. Property transfers. Most meant nothing to her. One phrase did. Sterling Family Trust. Her pulse quickened. Lucas, she said carefully. Why does every trail lead back to the trust? Silence lingered for several moments. Then came the answer. Because the trust was never supposed to become available this soon. Ava frowned. What does that mean? Your grandfather structured everything around the first child born into the family. Ava felt the air leave her lungs. Memories surfaced instantly. Conversations she barely paid attention to years ago. Attorneys discussing inheritance structures. Financial advisors talking about future generations. She had trusted others to handle the details. Mostly Nathan. The child changes everything, Lucas continued. The moment your baby is born, control over several major assets begins transferring according to the trust schedule. Ava stared at the note. And Nathan needs access to those assets. Desperately, the word echoed through the corridor. Upstairs, Nathan reached a secured hallway near the west wing. He unlocked a private door and entered a small monitoring room. Several screens displayed different sections of the property. One screen showed the hidden corridor. Nathan froze. The corridor appeared empty. The camera still worked. The door remained closed. Yet the alert had not been wrong. Someone had been there. He zoomed in on the image. Then his eyes narrowed. The hidden keypad compartment was open. His expression changed instantly. Down below, Ava heard a faint mechanical hum somewhere inside the walls. The corridor suddenly felt more alive than before. Someone knows I am here, do they not? She asked. Lucas did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded grim. If the compartment is open, then yes. Ava glanced toward the camera near the ceiling. For the first time, she noticed a tiny red indicator light glowing beside the lens. Watching. Recording. Reporting. Then we do not have much time. No, Lucas replied. We do not. At that exact moment, footsteps echoed from the direction of the hidden entrance. Ava spun around. The sound was distant but unmistakable. Someone had entered the passageway. One step, then another. Slow, careful, intentional. Her heart began racing. Lucas, she whispered. Someone is coming. Silence followed. Then his voice dropped lower than before. Listen to me carefully. If it is Martha, trust her. If it is Nathan, do not tell him about the drive. The footsteps continued drawing closer. The corridor lights reflected against the steel door. Ava tightened her grip on the folded note. Every answer she had found tonight had created a larger question. And now, somewhere between the locked basement and the hidden archive, the next piece of the truth was walking directly toward her. The footsteps grew louder with every second. Ava stood frozen in the center of the corridor, one hand resting protectively over her stomach while the folded note remained clutched in her other hand. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The hidden storage drive felt heavier in her pocket than it should have. Somewhere above, music still played. Guests still laughed. Yet beneath the mansion, the atmosphere felt completely different now, like the final moments before a storm breaks. One more footstep echoed through the passage. Then another. Finally, a figure appeared around the corner. Ava immediately released the breath she had been holding. Martha, the housekeeper, hurried toward her, visibly out of breath. Thank goodness. Martha stopped beside her and glanced toward the steel door. I knew something was wrong. Ava nodded. You saw the cameras? I saw Nathan take you downstairs and come back alone. Martha lowered her voice. Then I found security records that should not exist. Behind the steel door, Lucas spoke for the first time since the footsteps began. Martha Reed. Martha's eyes widened. Lucas Grant. Even through the barrier, surprise filled the corridor. You know each other? Ava asked. Martha nodded slowly. Years ago. Lucas laughed softly. Before I became a problem. The sentence carried more meaning than explanation. Martha stepped closer to the keypad and studied it carefully. The system has been modified. Ava showed her the note and the hidden storage drive. Martha's expression changed immediately. You found the archive key. The what? The archive key. Martha pointed at the drive. That device opens the restricted records. Ava felt her pulse quicken again. What records? Lucas answered from behind the door. Everything Nathan never wanted anyone to see. Upstairs, Nathan stood inside the monitoring room staring at the security feed. His jaw tightened. Martha had entered the corridor. That complicated everything. He trusted very few people. Martha had once been one of them. Not anymore. He watched as the three names he feared most became connected by a single hidden hallway beneath his mansion. Ava, Martha, Lucas. The situation was moving too quickly. Back below, Martha inserted a maintenance code into the keypad. Several lights flashed across the display. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a mechanical click echoed through the steel door. Ava stared at her. You can open it? I can try. Another code appeared on the screen. Martha entered it. A second lock disengaged. Then a third. The corridor filled with the sound of heavy mechanisms shifting behind the wall. Slowly, the steel door began moving. Cool air drifted outward. Ava stepped back instinctively. The opening widened inch by inch until the room beyond finally became visible. Rows of filing cabinets stretched across the hidden space. Computer monitors glowed softly in the darkness. Shelves filled with storage boxes lined the walls. It looked less like a basement and more like a private financial archive. Then Ava saw Lucas Grant. He stood near a desk covered with documents. Older than she remembered. Tired, but unmistakably real. For a moment, nobody spoke. The mystery that had started with a locked basement door now stood directly in front of her. Lucas looked at Ava and then at the storage drive in her hand. Good, he said quietly. You found it before Nathan did. Ava stepped into the archive and looked around. Hundreds of folders. Thousands of pages. Years of records. The scale of it was overwhelming. Then her eyes landed on a file sitting alone on the desk. Across the front, typed in bold black letters, were three words that made her blood run cold. Sterling Family Trust. And beneath that title was a date less than 3 months away. The estimated birth date of her child. Ava stared at the file while the quiet hum of the archive servers filled the room. The word Sterling Family Trust seemed almost unreal now. For years, those documents had existed somewhere in the background of her life, handled by attorneys, accountants, and advisors. Tonight, they suddenly became the center of everything. She opened the file carefully. Inside were pages of legal language, transfer schedules, asset summaries, and inheritance provisions. Most of it looked complicated. One section did not. The highlighted paragraph referenced the first child born into the Sterling bloodline. Ava's eyes moved lower. Then she found the number. She stopped breathing for a moment. The trust controlled assets worth tens of millions of dollars. Real estate holdings. Investment portfolios. Family reserves accumulated across generations. The amount was staggering. Martha stepped beside her and quietly read the page. My goodness. Lucas nodded from across the room. Now you understand why tonight matters. Ava slowly looked up. Nathan was trying to access this? Not directly, Lucas replied. The structure prevents that. He walked toward a nearby cabinet and removed another folder. But if certain financial conditions were met, he could influence how parts of it were managed. Ava accepted the folder. Inside were corporate reports, debt summaries, refinancing agreements, emergency loan applications. Every page carried the same message. Nathan's empire was under pressure. Much more pressure than anyone outside his inner circle realized. Upstairs, guests continued celebrating. Music drifted through the mansion. Champagne flowed. Yet rumors had already begun spreading through the ballroom. Several investors noticed Nathan's repeated absences. Others noticed Martha was missing as well. Small questions started circulating from group to group. Nathan returned to the ballroom briefly and forced another smile. The performance felt harder now. Every minute increased the risk. He knew the archive had been opened. He knew someone had reached Lucas. What he did not know was how much they had already discovered. Back below, Ava continued reviewing documents. The deeper she looked, the clearer the pattern became. Corporate losses had been concealed through increasingly complicated transactions. Properties had been leveraged. Accounts had been moved. Deadlines had been extended. The entire structure looked like a man desperately trying to keep several collapsing walls from falling at the same time. Then she found a document dated 6 weeks earlier. Her heart skipped. It contained projections connected to the trust and the future birth of her child. "Lucas," she said quietly. "He planned around the baby." Lucas met her gaze. "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. That is when I finally understood what he was doing. Silence settled across the room. Martha copied files onto multiple storage drives while Ava continued reading. Every new page answered one question and created 2 more. Then a soft notification appeared on one of the monitors. "Access request denied." Another appeared seconds later. Then another. Lucas immediately moved toward the screen. "He is trying to get back in." Ava felt her pulse accelerate. "Can he?" Lucas shook his head. "Not while the archive is active." Martha looked up. "How long will that last?" Lucas checked the display. His expression darkened. "Not long." The room fell silent again. Everyone understood what that meant. Time was running out. Ava looked around the hidden archive. Years of secrets filled every shelf. Enough evidence to change everything. Enough evidence to finally answer every question she had been asking herself for months. She closed the trust file and took a deep breath. The fear she felt earlier in the basement had begun changing into something else. Determination. Upstairs, guests believed they were attending the most glamorous birthday party of the year. They had no idea that beneath their feet, the truth was being assembled piece by piece. And for the first time that night, Ava realized she no longer wanted to escape the mansion. She wanted to walk back upstairs and make sure every person in that ballroom learned exactly what had been hidden below it. The decision settled inside Ava with surprising clarity. She was finished hiding, finished waiting for explanations, finished pretending that unanswered questions would somehow disappear on their own. She gathered the trust documents, the account records, the copied files, and the storage drives spread across the archive desk. Martha helped organize everything into 2 secure boxes, while Lucas transferred the final records onto multiple backups. Every document pointed toward the same conclusion. The life Nathan presented to the world and the reality hidden beneath the mansion were no longer the same story. A notification flashed across one of the monitors. "Archive security override requested." Then another. Then a third. Lucas looked at the screen and shook his head. "He knows exactly where we are now." Ava closed the final folder. "Then we stop hiding." Upstairs, the ballroom remained bright and elegant. Guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, while waiters carried trays of desserts and champagne. Yet an unusual tension had begun spreading through the room. Nathan Sterling was struggling to maintain control. Every smile looked forced. Every conversation seemed rushed. Several investors exchanged concerned looks after noticing how distracted he had become. Even the musicians appeared uncertain as they watched the host repeatedly glance toward the West Wing. Nathan checked his phone again. Another denied access notification appeared. His jaw tightened. The archive was still active. Someone was still inside. Meanwhile, beneath the mansion, Ava stepped toward the corridor entrance carrying a box filled with evidence. Martha followed beside her. Lucas carried the backup drives. The hidden passage no longer felt frightening. It felt like a path leading toward the truth. The old wall clock remained slightly open where the secret corridor had first revealed itself. Tick, tick, tick. The sound echoed softly through the concrete passage. Earlier that night, it had sounded mysterious. Now it felt symbolic. A countdown reaching its final seconds. Ava paused briefly beside the clock. Then she continued forward. Moments later, they emerged into the basement. The locked door that had trapped her earlier no longer felt powerful. It felt small. Martha unlocked it from the inside using a maintenance key she had carried for years. As the door opened, faint music drifted down the staircase. The party was still going. Ava looked at Martha. "Are you ready?" Martha smiled slightly. "I have been ready for hours." Upstairs, Nathan suddenly noticed movement near the ballroom entrance. His eyes narrowed immediately. 3 figures were approaching from the corridor leading toward the basement. For a brief second he froze. Ava, Martha, Lucas. Together. The color faded from his face. Around him, guests slowly turned to see what had captured his attention. Conversations quieted. Music softened. One by one, people began noticing the boxes filled with documents. Ava walked directly into the center of the ballroom. Hundreds of eyes followed her. Crystal chandeliers reflected across the polished floor. The massive birthday cake remained untouched behind Nathan. The contrast felt almost surreal. Earlier that evening, she had been locked beneath the mansion while everyone celebrated. Now she stood in front of the same crowd, carrying the truth. Nathan stepped forward. Ava, he began carefully. This is not the place for. She placed the box on a nearby table. The sound echoed through the silent ballroom. Lucas connected one of the storage drives to the presentation system that had displayed birthday tributes all evening. The large screen flickered. Then documents appeared. Account records, transfer schedules, financial reports, trust agreements. A ripple moved through the crowd. Investors leaned forward. Attorneys stepped closer. Reporters lifted their phones. Nathan looked around the room and finally understood what was happening. The celebration was over. The audience he had spent years impressing had become something else entirely. They had become witnesses. For several seconds, nobody in the ballroom spoke. The only sound came from the soft hum of the presentation screen as document after document appeared before the crowd. Financial statements, property transfers, corporate reports, trust agreements. Information that had spent years hidden beneath the mansion now stood in full view beneath crystal chandeliers. Ava remained calm. Earlier that evening, she had entered the basement believing she was part of a surprise. Now she stood at the center of a truth no one could ignore. Investors moved closer to the screen. Attorneys quietly reviewed pages displayed before them. Reporters began recording everything. Nathan looked from the documents to the crowd and back again. For the first time all night, there was no prepared speech capable of changing what people were seeing with their own eyes. Martha stood beside Ava while Lucas organized additional records on the display system. Every file supported the last. Every record connected to the next. The hidden archive had not contained rumors. It contained evidence. Around the room, conversations began in hushed voices. Questions multiplied. Several business associates stepped away to make phone calls. Others simply stared. The birthday cake remained untouched near the stage, its candles long extinguished. Earlier it had symbolized success. Now it felt like a monument to a carefully constructed illusion. Ava took a slow breath and looked around the ballroom. The fear that had followed her into the basement was gone. In its place stood certainty. She no longer needed explanations. The documents spoke clearly enough. Nathan opened his mouth as if preparing to respond, but the room had already moved beyond promises and reassurances. People wanted facts. And the facts were appearing one page at a time on the giant screen above them. As the evening continued, independent attorneys requested copies of the records. Financial experts began examining transaction histories. The questions that had been hidden beneath layers of wealth and prestige finally reached daylight. No dramatic confrontation was necessary. No shouting. No spectacle. The truth itself became the most powerful voice in the room. Hours later, the ballroom slowly emptied. The celebration everyone expected had become something entirely different. Reporters left with a major story. Investors left with serious concerns. And Ava left with something she had nearly lost. Clarity. 1 year later, spring sunlight filtered through the branches of a quiet park overlooking the ocean. Children laughed in the distance. Dogs chased tennis balls across freshly cut grass. The air smelled of salt and blooming flowers. Ava sat on a wooden bench holding her baby in her arms. The child smiled and reached toward the sunlight dancing through the leaves above. Ava smiled back. Life looked very different now. Simpler, calmer, real. Martha remained one of her closest friends. Lucas had rebuilt his reputation and moved forward with his life. The investigations and legal reviews that followed had answered many questions and settled many uncertainties. More importantly, the future no longer depended on secrets hidden behind walls. Ava looked toward the distant horizon where the Pacific Ocean met the sky. She thought about the old wall clock in the basement. the endless ticking that had guided her toward the hidden passage. At the time, it felt mysterious. Looking back, it felt symbolic. Time had been counting down all along. Not for her. For the truth. Her baby laughed softly. Ava kissed the top of the child's head and stood from the bench. Families passed nearby without recognizing her story. They did not know about the locked basement, the hidden corridor, or the archive beneath the mansion. They did not need to. Some stories are not remembered because of wealth. Some are remembered because someone finally refused to look away. Ava took her child's hand and began walking beneath the trees. Behind her, the afternoon sunlight illuminated the path ahead. And somewhere far in the past, the last candle from a forgotten birthday had finally gone out.